IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello everyone and hello Ayushi.
Hi Tash, good evening. I'd just like to tell everyone once again at what time we're recording. It's
Ayushi and
wait on a Thursday evening. So this is a double feature because there's a new episode out today and we're recording one at the same time. So this is like a podcast inception.
Yeah, it feels kind of strange because today I was like, the episode just released. Why are we? I was like, oh wait, this is in advance so that Diwali week comes up next week and we have a few days off.
Yeah, because Mama needs it.
Mama needs it.
How's your week been so far? Since last week?
You know, I'm back on the fitness train. So that means that my depression has taken a back seat. It is currently bathed in endorphins. So depression's feeling like chaka-chak and brand new and not interested in being present, which is nice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Today's my first day actually not working out because of the time of this recording.
I'm so sorry. And you had a long day at work today.
Very long day. It's been exhausting. But guess what? In a miracle, and I have it here to show you, I found money in my pants pocket. Quite a bit actually. So I'm wondering when was the last time I wore these? Where does this money come from? What is it accounting for? But I swear I put my hand in my pocket today to take out my phone. And like notes fell out. And I was like, this is like a gift from past Ayushi to present Ayushi. I was so happy. And just goes to show how little it takes to put a smile on my face these days because I'm hanging by a thread.
By a half broken thread? No, it's a thread.
It's a hair. It's a strand of hair.
It's a hair.
But anyway.
It's a frayed split end. Sorry.
But it's all right. Anyway. We're getting closer to the weekend. I will fall headfirst into my vices. They will hug me. They will hold me. And I will securely make it through till Monday. And then next week is Diwali. So peace out. You know.
Moja hi moja.
It's my favorite time of the year. I love it.
Yeah,
so,
same.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Or batao, or kuch, anything else you want to update us and our listeners about health, wealth, happiness, anything?
I started running again, which has been great. It's
guys, listeners, Ayushi's been running like a beast. I just have to tell you.
No, it's not like a beast, but means I'm running without wanting to like absolutely pass out at the end of like a 3.5K, which was taking quite a bit of time to warm up to, but it's meditative. I think that's the closest I've gotten to meditating in the last couple of weeks, which is great because you can just zone out. I've already started looking up articles and podcasts and playlists that are just for the runners, you know, like
for runners. Oh my God, you're in the community now. Oh my God.
I'm outside, you know, the glass knocking, being like, hello, can I come, please?
It's like I'm almost in that community of people who have protein shake. So I'm also a bit like...
No, but I'm one step away from like looking at really expensive running shoes. I already have expensive running shoes.
I don't think you need to buy really expensive. I have seen your shoes.
Yeah, I already have expensive.
Yeah, enough. It's all right. Listeners, if you're listening, do not make any faltu kharche. Like Ayushi here.
It's no, this is Diwali. It's the time the economy needs it. Please spend.
No.
This is it. But yeah, otherwise, not much has changed from the last time we recorded, the last time you heard us speak. But what is different, of course, on this episode is that we have a very exciting guest. And I know we say that every single week, but I can't help it.
Because
this run-up has just been great.
Like chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss.
Ek ke baad ek, ikke pe ikka, you know, ace on ace.
And that's not to put pressure on today's guest at all.
Never.
but we are so excited. That's all that counts really, is just how excited the two of us are to speak to someone else.
Yeah.
We have a very functional adult today. Even if she tells you otherwise, she is incredibly functional. She's incredibly successful. She is a role model to many. Welcome to the show, Pallavi Aiyar. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Ayushi. Hello, Ritasha. It's wonderful to be here. I have to say it's the first time anyone's described me as functional, many other things, but this is quite a unique adjective. And I guess, it feels pretty good. Hey, yes, functional me.
We love the word functional because to us, it's like, you are an adult because just by age, definition, phase, stage of life, we are now categorized
wrinkles, crow feet, all of those. Yeah.
All of the stuff. We are categorized as adults. But I think what we're constantly aiming for is like, so if that's just a baseline, there's got to be something that distinguishes you as like an adult that's making it work and the one that's struggling. So our aim is, how do we get to functional? Like just a functional adult.
Right. So the bar is reasonably low.
Very
good.
It's very low. It's like the basic functionality of adulthood. Like you wake up, you get your shit done. You don't go crazy. You go crazy, but you come back to your center. This kind of very basic stuff. You take care of yourself. You take care of the people you love. And it seems like you do that while being a successful working individual.
So,
which is mind-blowing.
Because first Pallavi, you have to tell us a little bit.
Yeah.
Explain why we are so excited to have you on the show.
Well, I'm still trying to figure that one out. This is fantastic to be on the show, and I'm excited to know that you're excited to have me. But other than my functionality and my age, why else am I on the show? So I am a journalist. I've been a foreign correspondent for the last, 2 decades now, probably. Gosh, that dates me. And I'm also the writer of various books. I've probably written about 7 or 8 books now, and a kind of mix of fiction and nonfiction. And I'll get to that. But let me begin my story with where it began, which was in New Delhi. I was born in the mid-1970s. I grew up in Delhi, so very much a Delhi girl. Went to school there, did my first degree in philosophy at College of Delhi. And then I went to study in England, where I studied history. Then I came back to India in 1999, and I began working as an on-camera reporter in what was then, it was still called NDTV, but there was no channel called NDTV at that point of time. It was, we used to produce all the programming for Star News. So we used to basically be called Star News at that time. And I worked for a year doing what I thought was my dream job, and then realized halfway, 6 or 7 months into it, that I hated television journalism and I needed to have another dream job. Didn't know what that would look like, since I'd spent most of my teenage life thinking that's what I wanted to do, be on camera, be a journalist, be a reporter, realizing that perhaps that's not what I wanted. And so what did I do? What everybody does, which is study further. I went off and did another degree in the UK. And, this was like a moment of great serendipity, because it's where I happened to meet a guy from Spain who was very interested in China. Now, stay with me. This sounds very random, but it eventually begins to make sense, which is why I said, serendipity. So anyway, we started dating and all that. And I didn't think that this was going to go anywhere. But, within 2 or 3 months, we found ourselves sitting in a cafe, drinking wine and discussing potential names for children that we might have in the future. And I was like, oh my God, this is weird.
Escalated.
Did not expect that. Okay. When all of this had started. Anyway, at Julio, my then boyfriend, who's my now husband.
Julio. I love
Julio. I know, what a name. Although nobody in India can remember it. I keep meeting people who say things to me like, how's Emilio? Do say, give my love to Pablo. And Antonio, how is he? His name has been massacred and been called just about everything else. But on the other hand, in Spain, which is where I live now, I am called Pallavi by everybody. So, I think he can suffer being called Pablo. I've even been called Pullover, Palava. You name it, I've been called it. But anyway, so this meeting with Julio happened. And Julio, although he was Spanish, was very interested in China and was convinced that China was going to be the future. I'm talking about 2000, when it hadn't kind of exploded on the headlines, and certainly not on the Indian psyche. So I was like, China, really? I belong to a generation where when we said foreign and abroad, we kind of meant the West. You want to go to Paris and London and New York. You don't want to go to Beijing or whatever. So I was anyway going off to LA a year later, because my degree My master's was a year in London and a year in LA. So I went off to LA and he got an internship and a scholarship to go off to Beijing. And we had a year apart. And during that year, I went to visit him in China. And, I remember just driving in to the city from the airport and looking to the left and the right and seeing the pace and the frenzy and the dynamism with which these enormous buildings were literally being spat up along the roadside, and thinking, holy cow, something is shifting in the world. There's some kind of tectonic shift going on, sort of geostrategically, globally, economically, and this is the center of the universe. I felt that about Beijing very palpably, right from the beginning.
Wow.
And so I kind of felt like this is the place to be, and nobody else was there, as in from India. I mean, you had people coming from all over the world, but there were very, very few Indians. Like, we just hadn't woken up to China at that point of time. Also, we'd had a diplomatic freeze since the late 1980s.
Yeah.
There'd been no high-level exchanges, trade was very low, etc., etc. So this was all very much in its infancy. And Julio had this kind of can-do attitude, and he was like, "Why don't you just come?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Why don't I just come?" He was like, "Oh, come to China and see how it is, and we'll spend a year or two over here, and then we figure it out." And as it happened, while I was visiting him, I saw an ad in a magazine for somebody to teach English news writing at a university called the Beijing Broadcasting Institute. I applied, I got it, and they provided me with a visa and an apartment and all the paperwork to kind of land up in China, not knowing a word of the language, never having imagined, I don't know. I mean, it was a neighboring country, but it didn't kind of loom large in my literary imagination, in my career imagination, in anything. So there I was, and I ended up living there for a long time, till 2009. We got married while we were in Beijing. I had my first son, Ishan, who was born in Beijing in 2008. We adopted our cats in 2006, 2 Chinese street cats. I learned to speak Chinese. I did a variety of things in the first couple of years. I was teaching at the university, basically like a glorified English teacher. And I modeled for diamonds at the opening of some new luxury apartment building, because they wanted somebody to look exotic, and it was hilarious because it was diamonds. So so there I was, wearing diamonds and the lehenga, and just being foreign in China in those days was a big deal. There were tons of people who became extras in movies and all that, like if they were white or whatever. If you could speak a little bit of Chinese, you could go on Chinese television and be like a performing monkey or whatever. So I did that. Then I was working for CII, for the Confederation of Indian Industry. I became a China advisor to them for a couple of years, but I was always freelancing and doing articles as well. That actually began in 2003 when we had the first coronavirus 1.0, which was SARS. I don't think you guys do even know what that is.
No, we remember what SARS was.
I remember SARS.
Oh, really? So SARS, but it's hilarious because SARS was a really big deal, and those were my first stories. So I first began reporting on the bloody virus that was spreading all over China. And eventually the first book that I wrote about China, which was called Smoke and Mirrors, the title of the third chapter was Coronavirus. So when COVID happened, and I had all these people, writing to me saying, how the hell did you know? Like, that was so prescient. Like, what is coronavirus? We'd never even heard of it. It was hilarious because, of course, I'd lived through SARS, and, SARS was a category of coronavirus. Anyway, long story short, I then became basically I started writing for Indian newspapers, and I was also still doing some work for NDTV. I was kind of like their freelance China correspondent. And it all ended with me becoming the China bureau chief for the Hindu. And I was with the Hindu for a period of 3 years, running up to the Olympic Games. China hosted the Olympic Games in 2008. And it was amazing. It was like virgin territory for an Indian journalist at a time when the relationship was really booming. We started having the high-level visits. Trade began tripling, becoming quintuple times of what it was the year before. We thought that, there was movement on the border issues. And I spoke Chinese, and that put me in an amazing position because, even when you did have foreigners living in China, you had very few who had really
assimilated as much as you have.
So I hadn't really assimilated. I think that would be a bit too much, but I lived in a very local neighborhood. I had quite a local life. I did have local friends, and I traveled the length and breadth of the country. So, it has 30 plus provinces. I must have visited 26 or 27 over the course of the years that I was there. And, found it absolutely fascinating place because in many ways I had no expectations. I think for many other parts of the world, you already have preconceptions, but this was pretty much a blank slate. And it was quite special looking at it as an Indian because although reams and reams were being written about China, they were all being written by Western commentators, by foreigners, I mean. They were all being written by Western commentators. And, it came across very differently to an Indian than to a Westerner. And if you want, I can elaborate on that later. And the reason I bring that up is because that kind of then ended up becoming my career, sort of bringing an Indian perspective to different parts of the world, which I think, as Indians, we talked a lot about India, but whenever it came to sort of looking, and other people talked about us, we've had a lot of Westerners explaining India to India. We've had Indians explaining India to India, but we haven't had Indians explaining the rest of the world to India,
Yeah, that's so true.
I thought that was really like a big lacuna. And, it was something I could do. And then in the meantime, my husband ended up sitting the civil service. So we got married in 2005. So he was my husband by then. And he ended up sitting the civil service exam for the EU, for the European Union. And so in 2009...
And you guys were based in Beijing at that time. We were based in Beijing. When all this was happening.
Correct. Okay. All these years we were in Beijing. So then in 2007, I wrote my first book, Smoke and Mirrors. It was published in 2008. It did very well. It won this Vodafone Crossword Book Award and it was quite a big bestseller. And again, we had no Indians who'd actually gone there, lived there, had the kind of very local life I had. So I wasn't just doing it as a kind of pundit and just talking about, geostrategy or whatever. It wasn't an armchair writing about China. It was really writing about China from the ground up. And I think that was quite unique and also it kind of mixed travelogue, analysis, a little bit of autobiography, and so it was quite bending of genres. And in many ways, that's the genre I like the most, a little bit of memoir, a little bit of reportage, a little bit of travelogue. And it's what I ended up doing consistently going forward in the different countries I ended up living in, which were Belgium, 3.5 years, when I worked as the Europe chief for the business standard. So I was based over there. I had my second child. We then moved to Indonesia. So we were in Jakarta and for 4.5 years. And then we moved to Japan for 4 years. And we moved to Madrid about a year ago in Spain.
Pandemic time has
mid-pandemic. Really. Anyway, and through all of this, I've basically been continuing to write for Indian media, for foreign media. I've been freelance for several years now. And I have several books out. I have Punjabi Parmesan, which is about Europe. I have 2 novels for older children which star 2 Chinese cats, which are completely based on my Chinese cats. And they are called Soyabean and Tofu in the novels and Caramel and Tofu in real life. And the novels are called Chinese Whiskers and Jakarta Tales. Chinese Whiskers, Jakarta Tales.
I love it.
And what else? Babies and Bylines. I had a book on sort of parenting and global parenting, bringing up kids, they're half Indian, half Spanish, one born in China, one born in Belgium, growing up in Indonesia and Japan. What does that do to their head? And how do I, as a parent, try to, make sure that they don't have to undergo years and years of therapy going forward? I'm not sure that I'm managing that goal, but I've been trying. And then I did a book on Japan. That's my latest book that just came out called Orienting, an Indian in Japan. I have an anthology out as well, which takes the Japanese paper crane as a kind of unifying motif and then asked a bunch of different Indian writers and poets to talk about the different fault lines in Indian society and bring the metaphor of the crane into it in one way or the other. So that's out as well. And
Pallavi, you are just too cool. How many things you have done? I'm unable to keep up.
That's the thing. When you said that you're not
my shelf.
When you said you're not functional.
No, I'm not functional. Can I tell you something? Can I tell you why? Can I tell you why?
Yes.
Because for a moment I forgot the name of my book. I don't know if you noticed about the
Japanese crane.
I was thinking, what was it called? Now just look at it's called 1,000 Cranes for India, Reclaiming Plurality Amid Hatred. Okay, so that's the name of the anthology. Big words. And
for everyone who's one second. For everyone who's listening to this and not watching it on YouTube, she's literally looking at her bookshelf.
This is my bookshelf over here. I don't know if you can
scanning it for her own titles.
Because I have Alzheimer's. I have early onset Alzheimer's. I can't remember a thing these days. I mean, it's really seriously bad. Anyway, let's hope it doesn't progress much further. But I have these horrible moments when, something just disappears from my head for a second. And I'm like, ooh, not good. But anyway, luckily this time.
Highly functional, highly accomplished adult in terms of just if you were to count the number of places you've lived, forget all the work that you've done, just the places that you've lived, raised children.
Yeah.
But let's just try to dissect.
Slowly extrapolate.
Take stuff out of this.
So many questions I have from this also.
Yeah.
Tell me.
I think it's more to do with so you've been on what I would say is kind of like, almost to use your Asia references, on a bullet train. Just kind of and this is also to tie in with our show in terms of the train metaphor, if I'm going with it here. And you have consistently different stages in your life you've had at different countries, different jobs also in different countries.
So many varied
right. You've kept reinventing or moving around. And now you're in a place and you're working there. Your kids are with you. You know, these markers of what a settled adult has. Just what are the markers? But how have you really kind of made your peace with the fact that you didn't have this idea of settling down in one place? And you know why I'm asking that is because Tash and I and a lot of our friends and our generation as such, we have this idea that, first of all, we don't like this word settle, because again, it has this negative connotation of that you're taking something less, or you're falling down for something, as opposed to accepting or enjoying where you're at. It's, you're settling for something. But you haven't really settled even logistically in one place. Like geographically, you haven't settled in one place. So your formative adult years, your 20s, your early 30s, how did you kind of make your peace with the fact that you were clearly doing things that your peers or age group wasn't really doing it this way?
Yeah, I think the problem is that I'm not sure if this is a problem, because okay, let me backtrack. I didn't think too much about it. Okay. Yeah. And I think that when you were, and that's why I'm saying that maybe it was a problem, or maybe it was not a problem, because if I did think too much about it, I might not have done it.
Right.
I was not sort of thinking, what's going to happen when I'm in my 30s and my 40s and my 50s. I wasn't asking big existential questions. I was kind of living what was happening, which was an adventure, and following my gut, so kind of like, meet guy, like guy, oh, China. Yeah, China looks cool. Let's go. And, frankly, I took a lot of risks, and I made a lot of decisions, which I know a lot of other contemporaries of mine would not have been comfortable with, because they would have been thinking about the future. But my thinking on this was that, there's upside for like learning. I'm very curious, and I want to kind of learn. And I've always been about sort of trying to drink in as much as I can about this amazing, wonderful world that is out there. This would give me the opportunity. What was the downside? That, the shit would hit the fan and then I would go home. I mean, ultimately, I always had this home, I had my mom. So I think my mom kind of gave me the confidence that there was a safety net. I mean, the worst thing that would happen is that I would just go home. So, I was lucky in that while I have ended up not having a permanent home, and I struggle with that question, like, what does home mean to me? Where is home? Where am I going to retire? And frankly, I still don't have the answer. But I did have a home. I grew up with a nucleus, a very strong nucleus. And I went to the same school from the time that I was in nursery till the time I graduated. And then I went to college. I worked in NDTV with a lot of the same people that I went to college with. And so I have this long sort of depth of relationships, I think, in India, in family and friends, that have given me the roots that then allowed me to kind of take wing a little bit with the confidence that, I wouldn't just disappear if I took off. And then these things happened, and they happened because they were choices I made, because the more I traveled and the more I lived in new parts of the world, the more I fell in love with the world. And it sounds like a cliche, and it sounds like a little bit saccharine sweet, ooh, she loves everywhere. No, and I think I can annoy people. No, because I live among expats in many of these countries, and I've noticed there's a massive tendency amongst most expats to moan and groan about wherever they are. And there's a lot of sort of culture of complaining. And I'm one of those people who actually really likes wherever I've lived, even in very difficult circumstances. I mean, Jakarta, for example, is a city which is difficult because it has, like in an Indian city, a lot of pollution, traffic jams, bad health system, sewer rats. And I mean, so the number of, I knew people who were having nervous breakdowns. I'm talking about the expat community. And I just found Indonesia fascinating. I mean, it's this Muslim majority democracy that had the most interesting politics of almost any country I've come across. A lot of pluralism and how they sort of handle their diversity, really makes you think about your own country. I mean, that's the other thing. I feel like every new place also makes you think of your own country in a different way. Absolutely. It's a journey outwards, but it's also a journey inwards in many ways. And so, I mean, it's a wonderful world, and what a privilege to be able to be out there and explore all these cultures, get to know them as well as I possibly can. I mean, there's a limit to how well you can get to know somebody in somewhere in 3 or 4 years, but I try. I learn the languages, I leap into the cuisine, I try to make sure that I have as many local friends as possible and travel, read very deeply, and ultimately try to write about those places as well, because that helps to distill your own thoughts about what you are seeing and sharing that with other people. So, yeah, I mean, the sort of point that you were making earlier of how have I made my peace with not having a home, I don't think I made my peace with it. I still struggle with it. And I used to joke at one point that, what is home? Like I have my homepage on whatever, Gmail, Google, and, that's home enough. But it's not true. And, I think the older you get and, part of adulting or whatever is having this sense of, I think in your 20s and then to a lesser extent in your 30s, you're on the journey. You don't have a sense of your own mortality. You don't have a sense that, this is finite. You have a sense that everything is just very exciting. At least I did, Now I'm in my mid 40s and, there is no forever. There's an end to every journey. Where do I want my journey to end? And I do miss, having relations, those long-term relations, those friends from school and college that I'm talking about that are not there in my everyday life. I do miss sometimes having to be always explaining myself, explaining where I come from, rather than being with groups of people who just know without any need for explication. There is all of that. But then, of course, I have my family. I have my husband. I have my children. They are very much my home. And in many ways, wherever they are is where my home. Home is where the hearth is, the hearth literally being the fireplace in your house. And that I very much have. So they've kind of been my constants, and I hopefully will be my constants going forward. And then there is India, and I very much see, once my children are older, having one foot in India. Like I want to be I want to be a split. I am a split person. There's going to be no one home. There's going to be no one country, no one place where I'm going to be there and then put up my feet and say, now I don't want to move from here, because that's just not who I am. But I think I need 2 places or 3 places. I need a few bases, and then I need to kind of move between those bases, because there's something that nothing but India can provide to me. But frankly, after 4 months in India starts driving me crazy, at which point I need to go somewhere else. And I need to be in Europe, which I love in so many ways, but then it's not enough. So then I need to go back to India. And, so in some way, there's these different well springs, and I want to draw water from all of those. And why not? Because ultimately, it's one globe. We are here as human beings. And I think we should actually be able to cross those boundaries and, like a migratory bird, have a home in one place and another home in another place, if you can.
No, that's
such a beautiful thought. And I wish, I could do that. That's
same.
my dream.
It's a dream.
Also,
and who knows how things will go, but it's my dream going forward. Yeah.
I think the interesting thing that kind of jumps out to me is not just like having this idea of course, it is everything that you described so far has made me feel like, oh my God, every bone in my body wants to just quit and leave and like jump into something completely new, leave the country, go on an adventure. Yeah. But I think also what I like in terms of like the adulting that you're doing on a daily basis is also being very okay with the fact that there is fluidity in your life. There is a lot of, up and down, and not in an up and down because down is bad and up is good. It's just you are like your life tangent isn't linear.
No, it's not linear.
Exactly. And you've managed to...
But don't you think, guys, that it's like that?
No, it isn't.
Almost everybody
exactly.
now. Like that is what we have to figure out, that the world is not linear anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we get so caught up making sure that it's going in a certain direction only, that we forget that it's not supposed to be like that, that it's supposed to be whatever your direction is. It's not a cookie cutter replacement for every single person. And I think we work on replicating that. And that's where I think most of our expectation management is the failure, and it what leads us to anxiety, depression, and stuff like that. But I just really like that you've been able to create that peace within yourself so that you can have the chaos around you, because you could say that parts of your life are a little bit chaotic, in a way, not in a bad way.
Like everyone.
But I don't want to kind of also mislead people because I mean, though I have had my share of anxiety and depression,
of course.
When, mental health issues, and it's not like one is just all together and everything is that easy. And in fact, sometimes it just catches up with like I had a sort of mini nervous breakdown years ago when I was in Jakarta in 2015 when things were going very well. I'd had my second child, 3 books were out. I just remember I was writing for the New York Times, which was something I really wanted to do. It was like a milestone for a journalist. And, I was thin, I was exercising a lot. And, no belly fat, unlike right now. All these things were great. And then suddenly one day I woke up and I just felt like, I don't know, like something terrible was happening. Like I still can't get over it actually because it's so weird. Like I felt like I had an exam. That's the best analogy. Like, when you studied, when you have a maths test and then you haven't studied at all and then you suddenly are going into give that exam and your heart is beating.
All of us are getting the PTSD right now because we know that.
But for me, there was no reason for it to be like that. And I just thought, okay, it's whatever, a bad day. And then there was a second day and a third day and a fourth day. And this went on for 3 months. In which I just thought I was losing my mind and there was no sort of sane reason for no rational explanation because everything was fine, but I was not feeling fine. And then eventually, basically, I went to see a psychiatrist and they told me that I had depression and I didn't feel depressed at all, which was the other weird thing. I felt, well, I guess anxious would be closer to it because of the palpitations and this nervous feeling or whatever. But yeah, and I went through that whole part. I started meditating. I was on medication and all of that. And, things got a lot better with a combination of all of that. And something I don't think about that much on a daily basis for the last several years. But it's certainly not easy. It does take its toll.
But no path is easy, right?
Also having kids. I mean, the other, I think, really difficult part is having the kids when they're small. Okay, I also had very small kids at that time. So when all of this happened, my younger one must have been about 2 years old, and my older one was 4.5 years old. He's now been diagnosed as being on the spectrum.
Okay,
he's basically an ASP, So and the second one was very small, and oh my God, the things that happen with kids, I can't tell you. Like for example, the second one was constipated all the time. Nobody tells you about all this. It doesn't sound that terrible, but it is when you're the mother and you have a child who's literally shrieking when he's on the pot, and you're trying to do your article and at the same time trying to make somebody, do their poo-poo and figure out what's going on. So you're being pulled in multiple directions. But, that's part of being an adult. My husband was having a midlife crisis about what he wanted to do with his life. And so, all of this is a constant. So, I mean, serious shit. It's not just...
I want to speak to you about all of this because I see that you've managed your professional life and your personal life and dealt with mental health.
Yeah.
But I think we should need to go into a break right now. And when we come back, I'm going to just pick it up from here.
Great.
Okay, listeners, see you on the other side.
Hello, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. An app for extramarital relationships sounds interesting? Well, it exists, and it's booming. On KBCD, Farad and Sunetru talked to Sybil Shidel from Gleeden, a dating service primarily marketed to women. On Simplified, the gang discussed the phenomena of sports washing illustrated by the recent Saudi takeover of the Newcastle United Football Club. On the Life Manifesto, Serena explains various lessons from Charlie Plum's life and how we can apply them to our own lives. On Say No to Drama, Chetna is here to slice the drama around workaholics and help understand the consequences of our choices. And learn how to simplify your personal finances on Paisa Vaisa as Anupam speaks to co-founders of 5Money, Sujit Narayan and Sumit Golani. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slate Coffee, Intel, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back. Okay, so Pallavi, I want to speak to you now, ask you the main questions about you fall in love, you make these decisions, you've traveled the world. I want to speak about fear. Did that ever play a part? Because I know you said you don't overthink, and you didn't overthink that time, and you kind of just went with the adventure of it all.
And your gut. You said you went with your gut a lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Did fear ever come into the picture in your early mid-20s? No, amazing.
Isn't that strange? Now that I look back, I'm like, my God, what was I doing? I think maybe it's just youth. I don't know. I think at least I developed much more anxiety and fear as I grew older because I realized how high the stakes were. I mean, you have a lot more to lose the older you get. It was a bit like I was telling you when I was in my early 20s, it was like, well, what's the worst that can happen? It's not like I already had a great career that I could lose. It's not that, and possibly the other reason I didn't have the fear was a very supportive family. I don't have, like a lot of other people, them holding me back or telling me that things will go wrong. And they've just always been very like, what do you want to do? I will do this. Cool. I mean, it was really like that.
Of parenting. They're
a bit like cool.
No?
Like, you want to go to China? Okay.
Cool.
So there's never been, they haven't ever been sort of like, they haven't expressed too much worry. And I think that if my parents were not expressing that much worry, then maybe that helped me not to kind of be fearful of trying things,
We always put that down as like a really high thing on the list of privileges. Like
it's a huge privilege.
People think like privilege is like monetary, but like because again,
mine had no money, by the way. So now I have had zero support.
But we think actually this is way higher because the freedom to do whatever you want, specifically coming from the culture that we come from, and you're a woman, it's like those double negatives are just kind of screwed into everyone's head already.
Yeah.
But having this and also speaking as kids.
But I think possibly it was also financial because like now and especially when I sort of see a lot of my friends, some of my older friends who now have kids in their 20s, and these people are still financially dependent on their parents. I find that for me, like from the time I went to England to do my first degree, I was on a full scholarship. And ever since then, I never took a dime from my parents. So when I was doing whatever I was doing, none of this came on them financially. They were not paying for any of this, and that meant that I was not very well off. I mean, when I was first in Beijing teaching English, I was earning $500 a month. That was my salary for everything, China was cheap in those days. This is a long time ago. I don't think I would get very far today on that. But, one managed and you ate in local joints with noodles, whatever, and you were fine. So, but all of this was just part of it. I mean, financially, it was my shtick. Whatever ticket I bought to go, wherever I traveled. I mean, so I think partly it was also just having that financial independence of,
Amazing.
Not
we talk a lot about
women
having financial independence being like the main thing in your freedom journey.
Yeah, totally.
And you are an incredible example of that. Yeah. But I do also want to understand, you fall in love, you marry the guy, you decide to have one kid, and then you decide to have another. Was motherhood a choice? Was it something you guys spoke about actively with your career going on? How did you arrive at this and deal with it?
There was so much mobility in one side of your life and you enjoyed that, you were challenged by it. Clearly you thrive in that. So then children, how did you factor that in?
Yeah, it was tough. And I was very ambivalent until the end about whether
I love it because this is where we are. We're so conflicted.
No, because I knew there would be stuff I'd be losing in terms of freedom. And, things were very good for me career-wise. And if I'm honest, that was the peak of my career before I had my kids in some ways. I think it was the peak of my earning career financially. There's other things that have happened, but, financially things did take a dive after that. And also emotionally, I mean, this is very tough. I would be lying if I said that is something you should take lightly. I was ambivalent. And I think to some extent that was a very conventional thing that happened with me. Like, it's just that, my parents, while there was no pressure and all, it was just expected. And I think I'd internalized that. So I also sort of expected it. So when you are ambivalent and you literally, I didn't have anything in either's corner. It was not pro or anti. I was really in the middle, and then convention tipped it towards being pro because there was, nothing really in the anti box. What do? We first adopted cats. And I'm not saying this facetiously. This was very conscious that we said, okay, let's get some pets and see how we do with them. Because, can we keep something alive? That's something that's alive. Can we actually make sure it doesn't just wither away, because until then we'd only had plants and I'd managed to kill all my plants. So the cats were this great experiment in parenthood. And, they're a very tiny step, obviously. But what they do is they take away some of your freedom. I mean, for example, when you want to travel, you can't just travel. You have to figure out what you want to do with the cats. If you're out at night and somebody says, hey, come back to my place for another drink, you're like, oh, but I haven't fed the cats. And who's going to feed the cats? I can't just go out for another drink. So it's a very small step towards curtailing your freedom and making you think about something other than you. So we did the cats as a kind of pilot project. But in the end, it was a bit like jumping off a cliff. Like I sort of realized that if I overthought, again, it was this overthinking. And I think with the kids, because I was ambivalent, that if I overthought it, I just might not do it. So at some level, it was a bit like a leap of faith, And then once you are pregnant, it's this sort of, it's a snowball. It's just going down and picking up speed.
And then you're on the
much you can
journey.
do to stop it.
And then you are the snowball.
Then you are the snowball. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that was that.
Right.
Now, after all of that, I mean, I think I have conventional and unconventional things to say about motherhood. The conventional thing that I have to say, which is to irritate the hell out of me, when I was not a mom and other moms used to say to me, they would tell me how horrible everything was, like, oh, my nipples, and oh, I can't sleep and I have to change all these diapers and everything is terrible. And then they'd say, but it's all worth it. And I used to remember thinking, how the hell is it worth it? Like, everything you just told me sounds really terrible. And nothing you have told me makes me think that it's worth it. Like, what is worth it, right? But it's really true. I mean, that is how I feel after, now Ishan, my older son, is 13 years old. So I've been a mom for a while, and he's, on the spectrum, has been an incredibly challenging child to bring up. Ishan is like one of those genius types, extremely bright and obstinate, and how I imagine Bill Gates must have been like, because I think he's Aspi too, and so is this Elon Musk. All these people are crazy, but they're very hard for parents. I mean, he's really kind of driven me crazy. I hope one day he becomes Elon Musk, and I get paid back in kind. I know, but I don't know if that will happen or not. But I've basically been going through tough times with him.
Teenage also now.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. Anyway, but so all of this drama and trauma and everything, but I just cannot. I think the love and the depth of the profundity of it, and the depth in your sense of who you are and why you are here. There's a whole sort of philosophical, epistemological shift that happens in how you see the world and your place in it, and all of that. It's quite ineffable. By that, I mean, it's difficult to explain in words. Yeah. It has to be felt, which is why it's easy to explain why it's bad. Okay. Oh, I didn't sleep for 8 years. Oh, I ended up with, chronic stress or whatever. My back broke, or, there's many, many things that are very difficult about parenting. And you can explain those in great detail. What makes it worth it is much harder to explain, but there is something. I think it's some kind of emotion, and it's a very intense and passionate love. And, it's a wonderful thing to experience, which does not mean that if you choose not to have kids, you are not going to experience intense and passionate love. You can experience intense and passionate love in different ways. I do think the kind of relationship that you have with your children is its unique relationship, and you can choose not to have it. You can still be very fulfilled by having other kinds of love in your life. But if you do choose to have it, it is something, at least in my case, that has been, just profound and wonderful. And I would not for anything have not done it, despite the fact that it was very difficult. And I didn't have easy kids, some people have these kids that sleep and go here and then are very well behaved and all. I struggle, and I've cried, and I've fought with them, and it's going to continue. We have quite a sort of clash.
Your elder one is 13. Good luck.
It's just begun.
It's terrible. Some of the things he said and all. But I mean, here we are. And I guess there is something to do with biology or what, I don't know. It's difficult to say, but it is extremely, it's hard to speak without speaking in cliches when I talk about this. And I hate speaking in cliches. But it's true. It's life-changing. It's all worth it and all. It's true, So and I also just think now I sometimes wonder if I didn't have kids, I think I'd just be really bored and narcissistic. I mean, me personally, I'm not saying other people are, but it's just a very sort of fulfilling part of me. And I think it also takes your attention. It's taken my attention away from me. I have other very important things to think about. So it makes me less of a narcissistic person and less self-focused. There are a lot of problems that we all have, and you can dwell on them, but I just can't at beyond a certain point, because you've kind of got
get on with your day as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm letting this soak in.
Yeah.
Because I've been having a lot of thoughts about
Are you going to have kids?
I wanted
Have you thought about having kids?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about it recently, wanting to, not wanting to. And I was, anyways, that's why I'm in this space now of processing.
Yeah. It's a big decision.
Obviously.
And you know that. Yeah.
The thing that you said was, that it could be the biology of it. And that's what I've been really wrestling with, because I think Tash knows this, and quite a few of my friends know this, that all my life growing up, I never wanted children. I had I never felt that thing.
The urge, that maternal urge. Yeah.
When you saw a baby to go for it, I was not the person.
But can I just tell you, I still have no interest in other people's children and all of that. But I really don't. I find them quite gross, and I drool, and when people say, "Oh, my baby, I love babies," I have none of those feelings. But for my own babies,
that's what my mom said.
It is beyond belief. It's not just that I think they're cute or whatever. I wanted to eat them, physically. I just want to hold them and touch them and smell them. And I swear to you, it's such a passionate, it's without the sort of romantic sexual element, but it almost sounds like that, because it's so intense, and touch plays such an important role in it. You almost want to consume physically. And of course, the child has no interest in being consumed or in being cuddled by you. So most of it is like the child running away from mama while mama is running off. Say, cuddle me one more time, give me a kiss. And it's terrible. I actually tell them things like, when you have girlfriends and all of that, you better vet them with me, okay? Because I'm coming with you. I'm a package over here. I'm a traditional Indian mom. You remember I'm number one in your life. I'm joking. I'm not really going to be like that. But I understand where those feelings come from. I suddenly have more sympathy with all these sasses in the Saas Bahu serials. It's funny.
But it has to be the biology of it, because even when you're a person, because I'm on the cusp, I'm just about to turn 30. And I don't know what it is, but now every time it's that time.
Congratulations, by the way. The 30s are the best.
I'm excited for them.
God, I can't wait.
I'm excited. But it's I feel like the time of the month when my hormones are at an all-time high, I can't help but sometimes even a thought that just crosses your mind where you're like, oh, I guess I could do that when I have kids. And I catch myself thinking that one line. I'm like, I just thought, first of all, in the future tense, I thought of a future in which I have progeny. And I thought of doing something, making a conscious decision at this age that could affect my future and my future children. And that's a huge, huge personality shift for me. And on one hand, you attribute it to adulthood. This time, this age that you're in. But I think there's another thing to be said, that it's coming from inside me. It's not coming
imperative.
from here. It's not coming from here. It's coming from this lower tap system. That's
uterus. It's called the uterus.
Yes. She is a horrible human being. She's so bad to me. But in the sense that when you had kids, did you fight that a little bit to pick your career sometimes? Or did you... I know that your first, you said that you jumped into it because there was a level of ambivalence. But for your second, say today, that second one was a decision.
Why I didn't want to have the second one was because of my first one. My first one was such a nightmare. I mean, seriously, did not sleep. I remember being 6 months into it thinking I've made the worst mistake of my life. This is just, what have I done? And you can't undo it. And like every other decision in your life, you can. Right? There's this is it. And I remember thinking, holy shit. It was, I remember actually even being in the hospital and when they gave me the baby and all that. And I was like, oh, very nice. And then after you kind of are done, you kind of have this moment where you think someone's going to take the baby away. And then you realize, no, this is now with you forever. It's like, what? You mean I did not come.
And you thought
it's quite a big deal, forever and ever and ever in every moment of your life, every night, it's like a really big deal.
So having the second one, how did you rationalize
my husband really wanted to have it. And I think it was because he is an only child. And so he always thought that, he wanted to have another child. And I had a brother and I had a wonderful relationship with my brother. So I was also I liked the idea of siblings.
Yeah.
And then, so I think again, maybe a bit conventional. It's what I was used to. My husband wanted another one. I'd already done it once. So, what the hell? Although there is this writer, called Alice Walker. And I can't remember what she said, that she had written something like, if you're a writer, if you're an author, you should only have one child, because with one child, you can still move. With two, you're a sitting duck. And there's some truth to it, because the other thing is that people say these things about the second child, which are untrue, which is like so much easier with the second one, and then they'll play together, and then you'll be more free, and all of this. And you're like, what are you smoking? I don't know if this is some kind of societal hallucination or whether there's some kind of conspiracy theory to force you into having second children, but everything is double the work, So like if it was like 6 hours of your life a day that you spent on child number one, you are now going to spend 12 hours of your life on child number one. And then after that, child number two. And then when they can start communicating, they will fight all the time. And you are going to be this lifelong adjudicator between the two of them. They will play nicely together. I mean, maybe some children somewhere, live up to that ideal. But the majority are like basically...
It gets better when you're older. I think when I was 13 and my brother was younger, there was a very different relationship.
Look at the timelines, and it's true. I actually do think everything gets better. Like for me, being a mother to a 10 and a 13-year-old is wonderful. And it is far better than being a mother to a 2 and a 5-year-old. That age was horrible for me. Although a lot of people say the opposite. Some people love that age or whatever. For me, it has just got better and better and better. But if you look at the timeline, that's still 10 years. It's like a decade of your life before you get to that point. So we're not talking, and I think that was the other thing about motherhood, the timelines. That was before that, nothing took that long, So this idea that things will get better when he's 5, and he's 5 months old right now, and they're talking about when he's 5 years old. You're like, what? What am I supposed to do for the next 5 years? So
you deserve a medal.
No, every mother deserves a medal. I notice every single.
I feel like I need to go and hug my mother right now.
My own mother,
Your mothers deserve the medal. Yeah, it's what it is. And it's true also, another cliche that's very true is that the years are long, but the days are short. No, the opposite. The days are long, but the years are short. And that's true. Like every day when you have a small child can feel like forever. How am I going to get through the next 3 hours with a 7-month-old? What am I going to do to entertain that child? And the day can just go on and on. But then suddenly one day they're 13 and you look back and you're like, 13 years? Like, holy shit, they just went by like that. So you have this synchronicity with time where on the one hand everything gets stretched out and on the other hand everything gets like super compressed.
That's nuts. And like to also have 2 parallel tracks going on, because you have your career on one side and then you have this family life. And if I could just pivot to kind of back to your work, and now you've been like bureau head, the desk head for many different countries in South Asia and
China. And
exactly. And this was a correspondent for India as well. And so I think like what I'm trying to talk towards and kind of get you to give me your opinion on, because it's something that I personally feel very strongly about and I struggle with. Tash knows, a lot of our listeners know that this is a conversation that keeps coming up, is that how do we rationalize being young, educated, privileged kind of citizens of this democracy right now? In this age. Now, you are an Indian who has been very global. You've lived in different places. You've been exposed to different versions of governance, politics, journalism. Yeah. You've represented different forms of it. And you, like you said, you were an Indian explaining different things to Indians. And then you were also an Indian explaining Indians to other people. Like you had that bridge. Today, and you don't have to answer this question if you feel uncomfortable, but like, how do you rationalize and explain some of the oddities and the kind of nuances that we seem to be grappling with right now in India, that we aren't sure, we're not sure-footed. And as specifically 20-somethings, we have this inability to understand what is the right thing for us to do in this situation. Because everywhere we go, we're mired in some sort of controversy, and then you get stuck because you're stuck between doing your job, wanting to be a good citizen, wanting to stand up for something, but then you're fearful, you're worried. Yeah. How are you supposed to
But it's an impossible situation, right?
It is.
I think that's why we all suffer so much and struggle so much with these contradictions and kind of trying to square a circle. I do think that over time, I've become more disillusioned with India. And, I grew up in love with my country. I had a romantic love for the country. I had a romantic love for our pluralism, for our history, for how we were so unique in being both spiritual and secular. And, I had this kind of idealized childhood. My best friend was a Muslim, lived next door. We celebrated all the religions. I was like the textbook child. It's also what I read in my school textbooks. It's what we were taught. And I loved that about it. I lived in Nizamuddin in Delhi, which is got a Sufi shrine, and then it has Humayun's tomb. And I used to play in the tomb, now the tomb is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and all of that. But in the 1980s, it was a ruin and there was no guard or anything. You could just go in. And that was basically where I used to walk my dog. And I used to I learned to roller skate on the tombs, actually. I mean, now when I look back on it, it's like, oh my God, there was like a jungle over there, and Lodi Gardens. And sorry, these are very Delhi-centric references, but Delhi is a Muslim city.
I was just going to say, you grew up again in a very different city than both of us did.
Very different space, because Delhi it was like the center of the Mughal Empire for centuries. Yeah. And then basically the Delhi culture was an Islamic culture. And then at partition, they left for Pakistan, and we ended up having immigrants coming into Delhi. So like the new people who live in Delhi, and I'm one of them. My father is from the south, my mother is from Lucknow. So I'm not some old Delhi person myself. All I'm saying is that there is no culture in Delhi today because of that thing that happened. Absolutely. Where actually people from Delhi left, and it's completely peopled by people who are not really from Delhi. So that explains some of the paradoxes and problems that Delhi has. But for me, I loved the city. I loved the architecture, and I felt very much that I was I could feel like a very mixed inheritance, a syncretic inheritance of the Hindu, the Muslim. My father is a very hate atheist. So, all of this was like, these were just all ideas that were floating around. So none of this was like specially religious, but beautiful and, Indian, and wow, what a country. And, we had a lot of problems, and we were poor and we were developing, but we had a lot to be proud of. And then I've spent 20 years out of the country now, 21 years. I've spent more time outside the country than I have lived in the country. Yeah. So that just changed. That ratio just changed recently. And I mean, over the last 10 years, it's harder and harder. And I think I've kind of given, for a long time, I used to feel defensive about India and embarrassed about India. And even when I was upset with what was going on in India, I felt that was an in-group thing. So you could talk to other Indians about it. But when you had to talk to foreigners about it, you needed to present India and defend it, right?
Yeah.
But frankly, I think that more and more there's the indefensible. And I reached the point where I was like, I cannot in good conscience defend this. And I think more than anything else, the kind of direction that the country has taken, to me, is very disappointing, because I don't blame politicians that much. I don't blame politicians because they're elected. I blame the people who elect them. We are not a dictatorship. We have had elections, and we've had people being voted in by resounding majorities. So in many ways, this is what a lot of Indians want. The majority of Indians want. And so my disappointment is really, it is with India. And I cannot defend that, and that, so, I mean, what can I say? I feel bad. I feel very bad explaining India to my own children. I don't know what to say to them about many things. And at so many levels, I feel it's so dystopic. And it's not just about religion. No, that's part of it. Yeah. It's not just about secularism. It's just about basic decency that, again, I'll talk about Delhi since it's the city I know best. I'm talking about crime. I'm talking about the safety of girls. I'm talking about the air pollution and the absolute callousness towards human life that is there, in most people, the kind of stuff that we just have to put up with because there is no option. The fact that, traffic has got worse, infrastructure has got worse, people have got worse, there's no tehzeeb, it's a dog-eat-dog world, the hate crimes, the road rage, the fact that, I can't park a car at my market anymore because there's too many cars, there's so many rich people now, everybody has 7 cars, they all go there, you have to have a driver who drops you 1 kilometer kilometer away and then picks you up. I mean, it's becoming a hellhole on just about every parameter. People are getting dengue and chikungunya and can't breathe. None of the kids can breathe, because the pollution is so bad. So all my friends' children are sitting on these. I'm thinking, my God, this is literally a dystopia. 20 years.
Yeah.
And, in the 80s when I was growing up, no, we didn't have so much wealth, but we did have cleaner air. We had less traffic. We just had less people, right? So, some of it is also just this crush for resources because there's so many people. The cities are growing and growing and growing and have very limited resources and have not been able to multiply those resources. So, whether you're looking at healthcare, looking at water supply, looking at just the, dignity of basic life for most people, it does not exist. And it's quite, I feel very, despairing. And then, of course, you have all this nationalism, this sense of triumphalism, like we are some great culture and some great power. And I just feel but what are you guys talking about? What are you tom-tomming yourself about? What are these bogies that you've created in your head to make yourself feel good? And what are the concerns you should have? And what are the concerns that you end up having? And all this hatred on Twitter and all, it's not as bad as in any other country. People get trolled around the world, but the level of shit that is said on Indian Twitter, the venom, the hatred, the threats, I don't think that exists in India. We just don't seem to have any culture. So, here I am talking about India and our tehzeeb and our this and our that. And then we look at the reality. And so I'm less and less defending it, and more just sort of telling people up front, yeah, it's pretty bad. Like if people ask me questions like, is it that bad? I tend to these days say, yeah. And that I feel that that's kind of closer to my truth than if I were to, pretend otherwise. There is, of course, it's a big country and it's a land of contradictions and there's always good and there is some positives as well. But I think that space is shrinking and I don't feel all that hopeful about the future. People say, the young people and all of that, but I don't see that the young people are this great cause for optimism. I don't see people standing up. I don't see people voting in the right way. I don't see people caring about the right issues. So, yeah.
I have a question though about the young people, because I feel while a lot of young people are very engaged in our generation, I feel a lot of us have also tuned out and switched off because of the kind of...
Well, there's a cost. There's a genuine cost to stand up, today.
I don't think, there is a cost of standing up. That's true. But it's also the other thing of like, how much are you willing to let in to disrupt your daily psyche as well?
And it's a fact.
How are you supposed to be going back to our start of being a functional adult and also do everything else? Because just like in any other country, some basics are still there. It is hard to earn money. It is hard to have a family and a home and fulfill your responsibilities. You are also, no matter how footloose and fancy free you feel, at the end of the day, you're still tethered to reality, which means you have to have a savings account. You have to have some sort of idea and understanding of you're creating a future. You're planning for some sort of eventuality. So that kind of straddling both sides of this thing of like, how much is expected of me today when we had those protests and stuff like that? Yeah, we took the time out the first day, the second day we went, and, we were there because this is not who my country is. This is not who I am. This is not the India that I want representing me. But then after a point, you were like, I can't ask my boss for a third day of me to go and stand for the protest. And it's not about how much I care. I care. Like you said, I am very romantically involved. The relationship I'm in is with my country. Quite frankly, I'm struggling with it. But it's like, then there's the other side of the social pressure of like, well, you didn't do enough because you're a young person and you're not doing enough. You're not standing up. So why should anyone else do it? This is the way the country's going. And like you said, very large majority elected the current government in the system. So how are you going to fight against it? But yeah, and I'm rambling, but the level of jadedness.
No,
that's the
thing that's crept a lot into the youth.
It's like you're a bit jaded.
How do you become better?
Yeah.
How do you participate in?
It's a bit like, say, when I was young, I think the analogy would be like towards poverty. Like I feel that as Indians, we were so desensitized to it because frankly, how can you live if you are sensitive? I mean, it's
Yeah.
so overwhelming.
Oh God, you'd have,
and it's everywhere that, I mean, you'd have to become like a Buddha and like leave everything and whatever, because it's impossible to just live your life and be sensitive to what you're seeing around yourself. You have to put up these blinkers to just live, to just be,
Exactly,
to just get on with your life. So I think when I was growing up, it was like that inequality and poverty was pretty bad, like near our area, we have a railway station and we used to get these refugees from Bangladesh, and, under the flyovers, you would see people lying there, and really there were times when you didn't know if they were alive or dead. I mean, they would have flies sitting on their faces and you just go by in your car, you don't. And frankly, that's so callous. I mean, after living in many other countries in the world, I'm very aware that that's not a normal state of affairs. And if you see somebody lying on the road, you don't just drive by. But that's what we did in India. And I don't see the option, like, unless you were literally going to just give everything up in your life and spend the entire day being outraged. And if you cannot be outraged by every atrocity, then can you be outraged by any one atrocity?
That's the
so
thing.
Then it ends up being apathy, because then you become like an equal opportunity, where that rape upset me, but not that rape. So should I really be upset about any rapes? Or, that lynching upset me, but there was another one that happened 6 years ago that I didn't know about. So then is it fair that I'm actually... So I don't know, there's just too many atrocities and competition with each other almost at all the time,
and
which
then
just make it...
There's this other idea that I read someone had written in an editorial being like, also, do we expect too much of a country from 1 billion people? Like, because then you have to wrestle with the reality that there's 1 billion people living in this country. You're comparing yourself to, and it's not just that. It's like today, you see one crime makes it to the paper. You get outraged at a level that's just incredible. But then if you start to distill through that, you're like, it's 1 billion people. If this crime is happening, how many more such replicable crimes are probably happening that you're not aware of? Or
unreported,
Or how much are you supposed to be irritated for? What is a basic crime statistic that a country of 1 billion people should be okay with? There's that side also, because that's a realistic thing to also say. No country exists without crime. If you have 1 billion people, what is your crime to population ratio? Yeah. Are we living within that? Are we going upset? And I swear sometimes you're thinking that is callous. That is a callous way to live.
No, but sweetie, Ayushi, so China has more than 1 billion people, okay?
But
it's a huge country. And it is not, I mean, under Xi Jinping, things have taken a terrible turn, I have to say. But it is, at least when I lived there, it was certainly not the kind of the clownish kind of dictatorship that Indians try to make it out to be, that they can do this and then that happens and all. It was chaotic. There were all kinds of things that were happening, but there was general social consensus on what are the important goals that we need to be reaching. And these goals had to do with human development indicators, okay? And you're talking about crime. I'm talking about things like maternal mortality.
Oh, no, I'm just
talking
saying
about things like diarrhea death. For more than 1 billion people, we should be able to have 0 diarrhea deaths. There's no reason for why 1 billion people cannot have 0 diarrhea deaths. You have to, you have to have clean water. I mean, the 1 billion people excuse cannot be used beyond a point. I mean, there's 9 billion people in this world, right? And, so I mean, and if we cannot have more than 1 billion people, then we need population control, like China did and have a one-child policy.
Yeah,
100%. You know what I mean?
100%.
You can't have it, or you can't just keep creating the world's most dystopic circumstances and say that,
100%.
we have too many people, so there's nothing we can do. All of them will die and not have healthcare because
control the
there's too many
population.
people.
Have less children. And this is going to be my excuse for when I don't have them.
But then it's a dictatorship. Then it's like, China and, one
But this is going to be my dictatorship to myself being, this is why we're not having kids. I'm like, no, you can't bring them. This is how I'm going to make my peace. This is how I'll make my peace with it.
But that that's at the India level, and then there's at the global level. And there's a lot of people who are choosing not to have children for that reason, because they just feel that, it's an overpopulated country with
why to overburden
planet.
Exactly. Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, it's distressing about India. I would
Adulthood is distressing. The world
Adulthood is distressing. And I think to be a young person in India today is very distressing. You have not that much control over the direction of things.
I am distressed.
A sense of powerlessness. No, and I can also imagine the temptation of just wanting to leave. I know a lot of people who want to leave.
And COVID has brought that in a massive way for our generation, because there's so many of us seeing the cost.
Every third person is trying to off to Canada.
And the other thing is like,
I've also been hearing about this Canada suddenly. Everyone's been talking about it. And die hard patriotic Indians, that I sort of grew up with are suddenly pulling out Canada relatives and saying that I can get some, maybe I can immigrate. And I'm like, oh my God, that's awful. These are not people I would imagine doing that at all, But yeah, I think it's just unlivable. I mean, Delhi is unlivable. So also I know a lot of people who left when they had kids because they just couldn't have them breathe. They were like unable to breathe, I mean, if you have an asthmatic or any kind of compromised respiratory system, it's almost criminal if you have the choice to stay in Delhi.
And it's a whole question of choice, right? Like that's
of course. If you have no choice, you have no choice. You're there. But I mean, more and more people want that choice and are utilizing that choice to move, even if they have that love for their country. It's terrible because it breaks you. It breaks your identity. You feel so strongly connected to this place, and yet you feel rejected by it and in a way just unable to be there.
It's a very toxic relationship.
Traumatic.
Because India's a very bad boyfriend, actually.
Yeah, bad boyfriend. Exactly. That was
because you want to love him so much, and you're like, and
you keep looking for something to love.
And you keep looking for it. You're like, it's there. I know it's there. And ever so often you get a little glimmer of it. You get a little shine, and you're like, that's it. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
Most of the time,
he's just not replying your text. He is not picking up the call. He doesn't say your name when he's out there because of other. Now I'm going into a Beyonce song, but you get what I mean. But before we wrap, because I feel like we could talk for ages, just person to person, do you have some, not to reduce your experience to just a few things, but do you have some like top tips for adulting? We like to do like top adulting tips from real adults.
The things you've lived your life
for you,
by.
like basis your life, not just in like a general way.
Yeah. No. I think that, we should really have a openness to learning throughout our lives. And when I say this, it's because I think that a lot of us are taught that learning is a phase in your life that you do when you're young, when you're in school and when you're in college, and then you enter the next stage of your life where in some ways you kind of stopped learning. You've done that and now you start doing or whatever. But, I'm really like a strong believer in lifelong learning and sort of retraining. And I think that's the way the world is going. It's no longer about, you've done a degree and then you're going to have a job and then that's that. So it's about learning how to learn. And sort of training yourself to be able to continue to learn throughout your life, and to be open to that means that you have to be able to also throw out some of the stuff that you knew to make way for new stuff.
Unlearning is so big.
It's the unlearning, it's the learning, and that flexibility of mindset, and losing some of that fear, at least when you're younger. I think really, really it's important to take risks, because if you don't, you will never have those moments of serendipity when it all just happens, and it happened because you did something. If you just stayed at home and never went out there, nothing will ever happen to you. So it's sort of creating those opportunities for serendipity is very important. Always,
I like that. Creating options so that serendipity can happen to you also.
Opportunities, yes.
Well, Tash, we need to do something big, man.
Pallavi,
we need things to happen to us.
This last hour has been so fun. Because
you've been amazing. You've been great.
I've
been
also
such
really
a
enjoyed this.
burst of energy. Despite the madness, I love the confidence and passion with which you live your life and talk to us who are two complete strangers. But you've let us in such a beautiful way and shared with us such wonderful things.
I have to know
I feel really grateful.
I have to know what your second son's name is, because now I feel like I have Ishan in my mind.
His name is Nicolas. So he has a Spanish name. So the first one has an Indian name, Ishad. The second one is Nicolas, but we call him Nico. Yeah.
Aww.
Well, our best to your mixed pot of a family. I think they're so lucky that they get to live this life with you.
Tossed salad.
It's amazing. And I'm glad that you get to be in our life now. You're part of our show. You're part of our journey.
I'm super pleased to actually have this opportunity. And again, big cliche, but speaking to young people in India, it's wonderful. No, it is. It's great because, most of the people I speak to are, much older actually than me. So it's refreshing. And I'm really glad you guys are out there and doing your thing, and all the very, very best for your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Rock on.
Thank you so
much. Can our
much.
listeners find you on social media or any such thing where they can reach out to you?
I'm on Twitter.
Handle.
My Facebook is private.
What's your handle on Twitter?
Oh God, I don't really know. If you type
in we'll find it.
We'll find it and we'll link it in the episode.
Pallavi Aiyar or P. Aiyar or something like that. Yeah.
Amazing.
But yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, and listeners, as always, thank you for listening and for your time. Yeah. It's a privilege, and we hope that it was worth it. So we'll catch you next week. Bye.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
What if you could relive some of the biggest and most public feuds in Indian corporate history?
Peer back through the window of time to see who among HUL or Nirma stood on top.
Or who was more dominant between Tata Motors and Maruti Suzuki?
Tune in with me, Ambi Parmeshwaran.
And me, Anupam Gupta, on Bank of Baroda presents The Last Brand Standing,
where we talk about two brands vying for the top position
and what their journeys were.
Every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast app or website,
or wherever you get your podcast from.